Hey there, Westchester University alumni. Welcome in to Ramblings Live. My name is Justin Pachoka. I'm from the class of 2014, and this is Ramblings Live, where we join, along with some Westchester University alumni. We get joined by Westchester University staff. Really, anyone that's tied to Westchester University comes on here and joins us for our Ramblings Live shows. Now, today's show is quite exciting. And if you read the description, you'll see that we were talking about spitting in a tube. And if you know what it is that I'm talking about, then if that at least sounds familiar to you, you probably were part of the DNA discussion project that is led by Dr. Anita Foeman. I myself was in that class. So I'm super excited to be able to chat with Dr. Foeman here today. And we are excited that you are here on the live stream joining us. We are giving away today. It was so popular last time we did this. We heard from so many of you that you wanted it. We decided to do it again. A Westchester University mask. So if you want to win a WCU themed mask, all you need to do is go ahead and type in the comments, tell us hello, let us know where it is that you're watching from, say hi to Dr. Foeman, let us know whatever it is that you want. Maybe you partook in the class, let us know what your major was, where it is that you live now. You're going to be entered to win. Every comment gets entered, and we'll be randomly selecting a winner tomorrow. So in 24 hours, we will be sending a message to someone. Now, I want to bring in Dr. Foeman, who is waiting on the side here, the star of our show. Dr. Foeman, thanks so much for joining me here on Ramblings Live.
Thank you for having me. It's very exciting to be here.
It's so good to see you. It's been a while since we saw each other face to face, but we've connected on Facebook, and I've been keeping up with everything that you've been doing.
Same.
And you're busy.
As are you, but it's really nice to see you. And you were in one of the early classes when we did this work, so you really got it going.
I was in one of the early classes. I remember it. I can tell you exactly where it was that I was sitting in Ruby Jones Hall. And yep. I remember doing the and we'll get into the into everything a little bit more in detail. But I remember specifically spitting into the tube, sending that off, getting my results. Yep. And you know what? I'll start off with what my results are, and then we'll dive into it, because my results were not very exciting. I said when we did the research first, and if anyone doesn't know, what we're talking about is the DNA discussion project, and Dr. Foeman's going to go into this a little bit more in detail. But from the student perspective, I remember that I was told, okay, go ask your family what is your ancestry. And I did all my research, and I've had the pie chart that I filled out to say what I thought and where I thought that my history lied. And I said I was 100% Eastern European. And you turned to me and you said, no one is 100% anything.
We're 100% Eastern European.
99.264%. I was very close. Yeah, I was very, very close.
Some people do know.
I guess so. It was a good guesser. Hey, we have a ton of people on social media, and I do want to give some shout outs here because Monica is saying how she wants to win the mask. And she's watching from Downingtown. She was an education major in 2018 at WCU. And Jemai is saying hi to Dr. Foeman. Carly wants the, actually Jemai is watching in Iowa, in Ames, Iowa right now, graduated in 2015 and then in 2018, participated in the study as well. So great to see another participant.
And she can post what she found.
Yeah, please do. Anyone that's watching, please reveal your results with us if you're willing to.
Morris out there.
And she's participated as faculty and also as an alumni as well. We want to thank Catherine for joining in. And we have Denise joining us from Bucks County. We want to say hi to her. Alicia also loving the mask. So lots of people that are joining us. Dr. Foeman, so good to see you. Thank you for joining us. I want to know, how has everything been in this environment with going back to school just 2 weeks ago? How are you doing? How's everything been?
Everybody's hanging in, students and faculty. And I had a class last week, and we had planned on having a discussion. And we spent all the time talking about how stressed out everybody was from the coronavirus. But people are really hanging in there. It's not easy. And you're running a project where people have to spit, and we're talking about coronavirus, is a challenge.
I would imagine so. Yes, I would imagine so. How has the how has life changed for you as a professor we really haven't had somebody on that's been able to talk about that. Can you explain to us kind of day in the life now? What does that look like for you?
I was fortunate because I was already teaching online and I love it and I love the technology and all of that. And so I actually thought when everybody went online, I was going to be copacetic. I was feeling a little bit glib. But the problem was that my students were stressed out. And so
Hmm,
that really took it down, a notch immediately. Some
sure.
of them lost their jobs. Some of their parents lost their jobs. Some of them had not signed up to be on technology. They didn't have computers. I will say that Westchester was awesome in terms of getting the technology to people. I had a
It's great.
problem with my computer. I called, they had a new computer to me in less than 24 hours. I'd never seen anything like it.
That's fantastic.
Yes. And so I must give a shout out. But it's still saying that it's still stressful. I mean, I don't care if you do 100% of things right. We're in a pandemic. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's great to hear that that everybody has been adapting to this, and great to hear from yourself who's had to adapt to this, and relatively quickly as well. I
Yes,
mean,
yes.
nobody really knew what this was all going to look like or how long this was going to last for, and to see that and
If
hear things are going well is great.
if there are any active students out there, let me just say, if they're struggling along, talk to your professors because we do understand. So I don't
Yeah,
want them to feel that they're in it alone.
yeah, that's great advice too. What has been the most challenging part of this for you so far?
I think just everybody getting on the same page with the technology, and
Mm,
it's disorienting to be in the house all the time. I'm very comfortable alone. I have an elements of me that are introverts, so I feel like I was built for quarantine. But even for a person like myself, after a while, you just feel like you need some human contact. And I've been watching that the kids have not been, socially distancing and all that, and I feel for them because they were planning on going to college and hanging out and having fun as you did when you were in college,
right.
internships, travel abroad. And so they have to put that stuff on hold. But, this too shall pass. It
Yeah.
really. Mhm.
So let's talk a little bit about the DNA discussion project for anybody that's tuned in, because I see we have a comment here that said, "I did not spit in a tube in 1996." Is this a defining moment for this generation? So for anybody that's joining us and has absolutely no idea what we're talking about, what is the DNA discussion project?
Yeah, and let me say, I had followed the Human Genome Project since before it existed, and that's what all of this grew out of. I had just, I am in communication and media. I'd always liked science. I'd always been kind of nerdy. And when I started reading articles in the Human Genome Project that said that you could trace back people's ancestry, I found it fascinating. And I
Yeah,
also had been talking about diversity. I mean, here we are in this world where not only do we have coronavirus, the world's falling apart in terms of like race and
sure.
people getting along. And this was a way for different people to get together and talk about their differences in a positive way, and people were like laughing and discovering things, and it was just such an optimistic way. So we started, the protocol has been the same since 2006. I asked people what they know about their background. I was so glad you said that you went home, talked to your family. I
Yep.
asked them to talk to their family, to put together a narrative. Tell me the narrative, come in as you see the young man here, spit into a tube, we send it off, and then we find out what the ancestry results say, and we have a discussion about that. And people, despite the fact that you knew exactly what your background was, people are often surprised by what they find and by their connections. And even for a person like you, I'm sure you had a lot of struggle in your background that comes to the forefront to talk about.
Well, I remember some of the results from my class specifically. I mean, there were some things that people were completely shocked by, and I know that there has been some stuff that has been uncovered in your classes that I mean, people have found out that they were adopted that didn't realize that. There have been people who there were situations of what are some of the situations? I mean, I remember my class, somebody there, and
Yes.
to be clear though, I mean that was right from the beginning. You let everybody know on day one that
Oh,
if you were not comfortable with finding out some of this information, there are things like just know what you're getting yourself into, and you did a very good
oh
job of
yes,
doing that.
yes. And at any point, people can pull out of the project, and and they do. I'm shocked when people stick with it regardless of what they find. I was
Yeah.
walking across campus when we were on campus, last year or so, and a student stopped me. We'd done one big project because usually I do it in my classes, and this student had done it. I didn't know everybody in the project, and she found a cousin. And it turned out that her blood uncle had had a child in high school, and this was her cousin. The family didn't know it, and it started a little bit of a kerfuffle in the family. But
Wow.
glad to find him. So
Yeah. Well, we actually just had somebody who just commented and said, I participated in the study in 2015 or so and got contacted by two first cousins 2 weeks ago. Even
there
now
you go.
I'm connecting. I mean, how cool is that? It's amazing.
Yes. Yeah. Many people have found cousins in their background for one reason or another. I mean, sometimes it's like weird reasons, but people
Sure.
had lots of cousins, fathers, siblings. And I think at the beginning, people thought of it as almost a party game. And I
Hmm.
think once people started finding out profound things, I have somebody who people had always said to her, you look Asian. And she said her parents said, no, the Southern Italian roots with the dark hair, etc. Well, she
Yeah.
came up as 50% Korean, and found out that she had a
Wow.
father than the person that she grew up with. And the
Wow.
interesting thing, and I've gotten anything I'm saying, I have gotten permission to share.
Sure.
The thing that she found, she's so incredibly like her biological father, it's like shocking. And they have
Wow.
connected, and she said, they get together. So these kinds of stories just come up all the time, just all the time.
Yeah, and it's fascinating what it is that you can uncover. And what I find even more fascinating is that you were so ahead of the game when it came to this. I mean, bringing this to WCU, you can go on to ancestry.com now, and I'd love to know, like, when did that peak? Because there's certainly now there are plenty of services that you can use, but you've been doing this since 2006, and
Yes.
I mean, you should
Yeah.
really invest in a lot of different stocks. You're very good at predicting what's going to be popular.
Yeah, I didn't invest in any of it. I should have. But you're right, because and I would never have guessed that things would be here. I grew up in an area that there were all kinds of people from different backgrounds, and people got identified as black or white. And I grew up in a very mixed neighborhood, and some of my interest was from that. It's like some of these people were not black or white, like, and I tested people that I grew up with and found stories of people I've known for 40 years,
Sure.
stories that I had not known about the complexity of their backgrounds. And
Hmm.
so, as I said, I had been interested. I was totally a nerd. I had been reading all these articles, and I remember, I don't know if you know Dr. Mike Pearson. He said,
Yeah,
I know
sure.
you like, this was in 94, and there was a special episode, a special edition of Nature magazine, and he ran the whole thing off for me. And so when I started seeing this, by the time it hit, by the time the tests got cheap enough, the first time I did this work, I
Hmm.
applied for a grant for $1,500. One kit was $450, and
Oh,
the results
wow.
that they gave you were so generic that it was hardly even, it gave just very little information. Now we're talking about precision medicine, and I'm drilling into some of these, what they call ancestry informative markers. And I'd love to just mention some of them if we get a second to do that.
Yeah. Well, because I'm curious as to when I had the test, I remember the test that I took specifically that semester was a new company that you were trying out. And I think you ended up going back to a different company. I know you've changed a little bit with
Many.
the ones that you've used. But at that time, I mean, for me, I had the chart. It was broken down. For mine, it was just one big giant wheel that said I was Eastern European. And that was kind of it. But we're talking, I think it was probably 2011 when I was in your class
That's
doing
right.
that. So 9 years ago, wow, crazy, 9 years ago. That's a
Weird.
weird thing to process. Yeah.
It is.
Well, hold on, let me come back into it now. Now that I'm remembering that was
Totally.
almost a decade ago that I was in your
Much,
class.
much has changed.
And so much has changed with all these different services. What are some of the things that people can find out? I mean, why is it important that this is happening right now, and that classes like your own exist?
Well, the fascinating thing is that it's important now because it shows the complexity of people, and it also helps to bridge fields, because here we're into social science, we're into biology, and they are taking the same exact DNA that we're talking about and doing targeted medicines with it. And so, if you get people to see this, and one of the neat things, I was always wondering, like, what are they doing to say you're this percent African, you're this percent,
Yeah.
you're. And so I started drilling down into what they call ancestry informative markers. And the cool thing is, there's a marker for what is it, HERC2 for blue eyes. It's only been
Oh wow.
around. It's only been around for 6,000 to 10,000 years.
Hmm.
Everybody before that had brown eyes, and they think one person had that mutation. He must have been very attractive. Everybody's like, oh, look at those eyes, and
Wow.
they think pretty much everybody who has blue eyes relates is then related to this one person.
Really?
and
That's
and
fascinating.
and there is EDAR, which is causes people who have, like, if you're Asian or Native American, you're that
Hmm.
straight black hair. There's multiple genes involved in hair and eyes and all that, but EDAR is one that's involved in making hair straight like that. And so it's one of the reasons that somebody who's Asian will sometimes show up as Native American, because they share
Oh
that
wow.
that SNP, they call it. And
It's really
so
interesting.
it's so fascinating. So here you get students who cared nothing about science going, that's really cool.
That was me.
Yeah, you're right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And
Science
so
was not my thing, but this was fascinating to me.
I'm saying, but isn't it really interesting to find that stuff out? And there are just thousands of these markers that you can drill down into.
Yeah, that's so interesting to see, and it's even more interesting to think about the fact that this is still kind of new, right? Like the technology, I'm sure, is developing and changing every day.
Yes.
And when you come back on Ramblings Live in 3 years from now, and
That's
well, we'd
right.
love to have you back every week, to be honest. But when you come back again, it's
Yeah.
going to be a totally different game at that point. It'll
Yes.
be all new things that we're talking about. I want to jump back over to social media because lots of past participants in this are chiming in and saying hi. We do want to say hi to Mike Vincent, who is joining on and saying hello to us. Kevin, and actually Kevin and Monica both have the same question. And rather, Kevin saying how he would have loved to have done this when he was in school. Monica saying, "Can I come back to WCU and take this class?" But in all seriousness, do you look for people outside of the students that go to Westchester? Is this something that alumni can participate in? Is that something that you thought about?
Well, a lot of times it's based on grant money. And so it
Okay,
depends what the grant money is, given for. And most of the time people want to give to active students rather than alumni. However,
got
we
it.
have chatted with people in alumni about doing something just with wouldn't it be fun to do
Oh, I
something?
think it would be really fun to have something with alumni. I'm sure, and
Yeah.
I'm sure. I mean, by all means, comment in and let Dr. Foeman know if you would want to participate in
And
this.
just think how cool it would be to attract a group of alumni back to, like, talk about their experience and, to do something neat like that. But as I said,
I'm
most of the time it's active students, most of the time.
I'm thinking it could make for a very cool future Ramblings Live, having maybe two participants join in, and we'll have a little panel
Yeah.
discussing results. We'll
And
we'll discuss. I'm seeing as people are watching. I see that some of the people from the Alumni Association are a part of this. So hint, hint, wink, wink. Maybe we'll make something happen. Comment and let us know if you'd be interested.
yeah, and when the world is normal again, whatever that is, when people actually come together for reunions, it would be a really cool project to do for.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Kim is joining in saying that I loved this project. Thanks for putting a smile on my face in watching this. So that's really great.
And we could all use a smile right now.
Yeah, Kim, I'm so glad that you're smiling along. When I saw that Dr. Foam was going to be here, I too had the biggest smile on my face. I've been looking forward to getting to sit down and chat with you. Leah joining in saying I did the DNA project at WCU in 2013. And the Alumni Association commenting that they love our ideas. So even better.
So we're
Even
talking
better.
to the right people.
Yeah, we're talking to the right people. There's no doubt.
I just want to say, when
Yeah,
one time we were covered, actually one of the early days, we were covered by somebody at the Washington Post, and I know exactly it was 4 years ago, because it was his
I
day,
remember this. Yeah.
and it was crazy on campus. And the thing that she said she loved is, she said, here we were, the world was going crazier. People were laughing and talking. And she was like, it's like a little island of positivity in here. So I like to believe that there's a place for all of it. But I like to believe that there's a place where we can have neat conversations that are deep and meaningful, and people of different attitudes can come together and talk.
Yeah, I remember never wanting to skip your class when I was at Westchester University. I always looked forward to it, and I may have skipped a few other classes, but
No,
I've
you
never
were good.
skipped one of
There were
yours.
a couple people, but you were good.
I brought up the photo right
Yes.
here. This is really cool, and I do want to talk about because I'm. How many times have you tested your DNA? I'm curious of that. How many times have you done it?
First of all, I have to fess up. It took me 10 years before I tested it at all.
No way,
And the
really?
reason was that the first ones I said were $450. I wasn't going to pay $450 for myself. So even as they started to come down and down and down, I felt like there was always somebody else that I wanted to give it to. And then
Okay,
finally, Dr. Bessie Lawton, whose picture is you showed a few
we have
minutes
her picture as well, right there.
and that's a project that we did. Bessie said, like, I'm giving you a kit, take the test. And at that point, there were about $79, so I didn't feel too bad about using a
There.
kit. But
Yeah, no, you should absolutely have done it.
yes, and it was important to do it because here I'm talking to people about how it feels, and I was a little bit shocked at my own reaction.
Yeah. So, what were the results? Do you mind sharing?
No, first of all, I identify as an African American, and every
Mhm.
African American knows they have Europe. I was surprised it was 23% European, which shocked me.
Wow.
And then a lot of West Coast, which is like the slave history. So I knew that.
Hmm.
But the interesting thing is, I had gone on a trip to Ghana, and it was really
Oh.
moving. There was you went to a trip to a place called the Door of No Return, where the slaves went out and never came back.
Hmm.
And I had a lot in my background from Ghana, Nigeria, and that. And I thought, oh my God, some of my literal relatives may have gone through that door. And,
Yeah.
it was amazing. The
Hmm.
other thing that happened is I said they update results. And the first time I had of the European, it was Scandinavian and then British and then a lot of West Coast African. And then later they updated and they took away the Scandinavian. And I
Hmm.
said I was kind of sad because I always pictured it like the Vikings beat up the Brits, and then the
Yeah.
Brits beat up the slaves, and all that was in my genes. And it really tells me, like, history is brutal. History has
Oh,
been,
sure.
yes, has been brutal. And it told that sort of story. So it was a little bit of taking that away. And so later they
Hmm.
identified it as British and then the African. It was the same basic percentages, but they took the Scandinavian away. And now they get tighter and tighter so that they're able to pinpoint, which is great. But it was
Hmm.
also neat to see that longer line of relationship, which is the older tests gave you that broader line of connection.
Now, and the more that people take these tests, I mean, the more accurate this all becomes,
That's
right?
right.
It's all just a big database.
Yeah,
If
you
there's
got
100,000 people that take it, well, it's all based off of that. When there's a
you got
million, it's based off of that. When there's
you
10
got
million, so the more information that's out there, the more tests that get taken, the
yeah.
more accurate this
And,
becomes, which is why it up.
and that's where these DNA companies are hooking up with pharmaceuticals because then they're looking at patterns in your DNA to see if there's sensitivity to certain drugs and so I have been shocked. This has brought me in contact with people in pharmaceuticals. It's you're talking about the recipe for a human, and it connects to everything about us, from mental health to physical
Yeah.
wellness to our ancestry. So it's endless.
Now, Chris saying that he's chiming in that he did this. She's so nice and so great. Margot Moss also joining in saying this project was amazing. My father always told me that I was Native
Oh
American
my
of
God.
the Blackfoot tribe, and I learned that I'm all Northern European. Finding it extremely neat that I'm 29% Scandinavian. Seriously, so cool. But follow-up question wanting to know, when did they take the Scandinavian out? Because it sounds like even in Margot's case, there may be some updates for her.
Yes, there probably are, but they didn't take it out. In my case, they sort of updated it, so it probably
Hmm.
was. Yeah, and here's another example. I know our time is growing nigh, but I had somebody who identified as Vietnamese, and she took the test, and it was almost all Chinese. Well, she went back to talk to her parents. She'd already talked to them. She went back, and they said, "Oh yes, we are ethnically Chinese." They fled China during some upheaval and went to Vietnam. Well, eventually, the DNA company will be able to identify that group of Chinese people who migrated to Vietnam, and they will probably update it and show her as Vietnamese somewhere down the line.
Yeah, that's right. It's interesting that it is always evolving, always moving. We do have a question from a past student. I do want to bring up your grandfather here in a second, but
Okay.
we do have a student from a past, or a question from somebody who took this in the past. So just stumbled upon this regarding the idea of alumni. What about alumni that had a test done or are looking for further interpretation of their results? In this instance, they saw a result of 0.02% Asian in their DNA, but they're not really sure what that means. So when something is like that, what I kind of remember a little bit saying that everyone gets those little microscopic little drops, but it was, I think it used, let's see if I remember correctly, 5% or more was what was considered to be actually accurate.
And I can see that you were a good student. Because it used
well, thank you.
In the early days, we said 10% and then 5%.
Okay.
And now, even if you have like a couple percent, there may be something there. 0.2, that's really error, and you don't know.
And it's actually 0.02%.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. So probably just nothing then.
And it's also shocking that the company would say you have pointed. One of the criticisms that people make is that they give the impression with those kinds of numbers that it's super precise. And these things, there's error rates, and different companies will use different ancestry informative markers. So it's complex stuff. So my goal is not to say to somebody, you're a 0.02% Asian, but to understand you probably have an ancestry informative marker that is similar to somebody in Asia. And you can have it just because you have a random mutation, or for whatever reason.
Got it.
If somebody way in your background, it's possible. It's possible.
Now, I'm going to bring this picture up. This is your grandfather here. And can you tell, this is fascinating. Tell a little bit about this.
He was a scallywag. He's my grandfather. And it was neat because especially now, as I said, people may be hesitant to spit. You can also go online and look up your relatives. And so he had a storied past. And so we have this picture of him, and you also will see his death certificate. And the story was that he was running around in New York and died on a motorcycle. And so indeed, this was verified by that. And so, as I said, in addition to doing the DNA, you can also look into those records. And I was just today finding my grandparents, great grandparents. And so you can really create a story. And part of I've also been, as I said, we don't have that much time to talk about all this. Genograms, you can go back and see like people 4 or 5 generations behind you have an impact on how you are, the culture in your family. So all of this is a way of creating our story and our narrative and getting some power over those stories.
I actually, similarly, I signed up for Ancestry.com, got really into it for a month or two where it was nonstop and built out a bunch. And those documents that you were talking about, I mean, I remember bringing up and seeing the handwriting of the census in like 1930 or something, and realizing that it was John Sachoka's handwriting. And the only thing that I know of John Sachoka is that he's literally buried in my cousin's backyard. And that's like, I remember growing up, and it was like, oh yeah, that's great grandpa John. And that was it. And then all of a sudden, here was his handwriting in front of me on the computer. It was fascinating to see. And with the death certificates, it was a great aunt of mine, or like a great aunt. She died cooking chicken. And I thought that was such a weird, what are you talking about, cooking chicken? And I looked it up and found out that was a common thing to happen, that ovens, while cooking the chicken, however it was cooked, would explode. And that was at the time, a very common thing to have occurred. And I couldn't believe it.
And were they immigrants? Was the one that you were able to find an immigrant?
Not my great grandfather, my great grandfather was. And then on the other side too, and that's what's fascinating about this too, right? Is that there's so, for me, it starts off where it's the Sachoka side, but then there's my grandpa, my grandma, well, Grandpa Sachoka, my grandma Glinsky, and we know that history because they've had a funeral home. It was my great grandfather that started that, passed it down to my great grandfather, passed it down to my grandmother, and we know that history. But then all of a sudden it spreads out in all these different directions. And I mean, it's just, it's overwhelming and fascinating and interesting. And, there's a reason I think why it's been so popular at Westchester University, your project, is because this is something that it relates to everybody.
Yes. And these people shape who you are. They shape who you are in one way or another, biologically and psychologically. It's so fun to talk about.
It is so fun to talk about, and I wish I could talk to you for hours, but
It's
I
been,
don't want to take up too much of your time. I
it's
want to thank
been,
you so much for
yes,
joining on with us and being a part of it. And Dr. Foeman, I hope to see you sometime soon.
yes.
We are definitely going to talk about. We're gonna do something with alumni. We're gonna come back on here and do it in a couple of months. I think that would be absolutely fascinating. So I am volunteering Dr. Foeman to come back again a little bit later on down the road.
Listen, you keep up the good work. We're so proud of you.
Oh, I greatly appreciate that. I'll see you soon.
Take care. Bye bye.
Bye. So that is Dr. Anita Foeman, who has joined us here on Ramblings Live. I want to thank each and every one of you for joining in. Now, keep in mind, everybody that has commented, you're entered to win a mask from the WCU Alumni Association. We're going to randomly pick a winner in about 24 hours. So anybody that watches this later on, if you're catching the replay of this, you can still enter to win the mask. So make sure you comment and let us know. We want to thank Monica for joining on with us, and so happy that you found this interesting. I could seriously talk to Dr. Foeman for hours. I mean, it's a fascinating person, and so amazing, the project that she started at Westchester University back in 2006. Also want to give a shout out here for Ram Nation. We love that you're joining us here on Ramblings Live, and would love for you to connect with current students and other alumni as well on Ram Nation. So go to wcualumni.org/Ram Nation to get signed up for that. I've got to tell you, I've seen the list of alumni that are going to be on Ramblings Live from here until the end of the year. And let me tell you what, it's pretty impressive. Now, I have to keep some of the names secret. Actually, I think I have to keep all the names secret. I'm not sure I can share it just yet, but I will tell you that we have some really memorable people from Westchester University that are going to be here. So make sure you keep an eye out on the alumni page for the schedule. And there's a couple of inventors that are coming on here, specifically one person who created a company that is a household name. And I had no idea that they went to Westchester University. And I've told a couple people about this, and every single one of them has been shocked and cannot wait for this. That is coming up in just a couple of weeks. More information, so make sure you stay tuned for that. Until next time, I'm Justin Sachoka. We love that you joined us here on Ramblings Live, and we'll see you sometime soon.